Okay. Okay, we'll start with the sloka from the last class. You want to recite the sloka? Yeah.
दुःखेषु अनुद्विग्नमना सुखेषु विगतस्पृहः वीतरागभयक्रोधः इतदिहि मुनिरुच्यते.
And the meaning?
The meaning is, if you are not aware of sadness, and you are not aware of happiness, and you do not feel anger, fear, or attachment, then you will be called a steady-minded sage.
Yeah, good. So that was what we covered in the last class. And we also covered the study goals. Now, next we are going to cover one of the fundamental formulas in Bhagavad Gita. It's a formula, it's like a recipe for happy living. So we are going to cover two slokas today instead of just one like before, because these two slokas are kind of continuous. So one sloka leads to the other. So that is the reason why we are going to cover two slokas today. And the first sloka is Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsah Sangasteshopajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha Kamakrodho Bhijayate. So what does this mean? This is a very important sloka which you will remember, you need to remember all your life, because it's a very important pattern that we should be aware of and then protect ourselves from, right? So the meaning is, when someone thinks of objects, attachment to them arises. From attachment, desire is born. From desire, anger arises. Right? So the meanings. Dhyayato means while contemplating, while thinking. Dhyaya, dihi means mind, right? Dhyaya means something that you do with the mind, which is thinking, contemplating. Vishayan means sense objects, objects of sense. Um, so which stimulate your senses. Pumsaha means of person. Pumsa, person. They are quite close to each other, English and Sanskrit. Sangha. What is Sangha? Not Sangha, but Sangha. Sangha means attachment. Right? Teshu, in the sense objects, in those objects. Teshu means in those. Upajayate means develops. Sangat. Sangat means attachment, from attachment. Sanjayate means develops. Upajayate or Sanjayate, they both mean develop. San, Sam and Upa both are helping the word. Jayate is basically develop, and Sam and Upa are both helping the word. Right? Sanjayate means develop. Kama is desire. Kamat means from desire. Krodhaha, anger. This word was there in the last look also, right? Krodhaha is anger. Abhijayate means becomes manifest. That means it stays with you. So the meaning once again is, when someone thinks of the objects of sense, attachment to them arises. From attachment, desire is born. From desire arises anger. So first thing is the thought. See, the first thing, the seed for good or bad is the thought. For anything good or for anything bad in this world, or for anything bad or anything good that a person does, the seed is is in the thought. So from this thought comes all other things. So based on the thought, the attachment arises. From attachment, desire is born. From desire, anger arises. Take, for instance, um, you go to a store, you find something really interesting to you. So that is the thought. You think about it. Oh, I can do this with this thing. Maybe it's a toy, or what are some of the things that you like, that you get like to get from the store? Yeah, maybe maybe clothes. Clothes, some beautiful clothes in a store. You see them, and then you want. The thought arises. Wow, this is so cool! I can wear these clothes to the party, the birthday party of my close friend. That is the thought you get, right? From that thought, what happens? You start getting attached to it. You feel it is yours. It should be yours. That is the attachment. That's how that attachment arises. And then from the attachment, desire is born. That means you start longing for it. I want this dress, right? And then you go to your mom or dad, whoever has taken you to the store, and then ask your parents whether you can get those clothes, whether you can buy those clothes. And if your parents say, no, this is not the time. We are not here to buy clothes. We are here to do something really urgent and important. So let's go home now. Then what happens? You become angry, right? So that is the cycle. That is a common cycle. Think, get attached, then uh, generate desire, or generate a uh, uh, what is the other name for desire?
Attachment. Wait.
Yeah, um, yeah, a longingness. So longingness, and then from that desire, you start becoming angry, right? So desire. So the cause for attachment is the thought. The result of attachment is desire, and the result of desire is anger, almost always, right? But the seed is a thought. So I'll tell you a story, a small story. So in a forest, a cobbler, who is a cobbler?
Shoemaker.
Shoemaker, right? In a forest, a cobbler skins dead animals to make shoes and caps. Right? That's how the shoes are made, from the skins of dead animals. Now he's very close by. There is a saint who is living. So the um, saint preaches all great things to people uh, around him, around that area. So every time the saint passes through the cobbler's home, whenever he sees the cobbler, he says, "Why don't you stop doing this? Why don't you do something better? You are skinning dead animals. It's so yucky. Why do you do this?" And the cobbler simply prays to the god and says that he will try. He will try to do his best to take on a different profession. But he never succeeds because he is so poor, and he needs to make a living, and he doesn't know anything else to do. So he keeps on doing. But the saint keeps on getting feeling bad every time he sees the cobbler. He's just across the street, right? It's like a forest or a small village kind of thing. Um, so it's just across. And then the saint really gets upset with this cobbler. You're not changing your ways. I'm telling you for good. You don't understand. And then he says that every time he sees a wall nearby, and he says that every time I see a dead animal in your area, I'm going to put a mark here on the wall. And he does that. Uh, for many days pass, and then the wall is full of tally marks. So every time there's a dead animal, the saint drew a tally mark. And then one day the wall is full of tally marks. So the saint calls the cobbler and says, "See, see how many animals you skinned, right? It's so dirty. The wall is full of the tally marks. That many animals you basically dragged them when they were dead, and then you skinned them and you did the shoes and all that stuff. Don't you feel ashamed of your life?" Then the cobbler says he really repents. He asks God for forgiveness for doing such lowly things. He says, God, please forgive me. And the same night, interestingly, both of them die. The cobbler dies and the saint also dies. Now, guess what happens? The cobbler's body is eaten by vultures and jackals and all sorts of animals. But the saint's body, the moment people in the nearby village know that the saint is not coming to their village today, 2 days, they quickly go to him and then find out that he is dead. So they really feel very bad about it, and they cremate the body with all the rituals. They put ghee to burn his body and all that stuff, right? All the rituals with mantras and all that stuff. He's properly cremated. Whereas the cobbler's body, nobody is there, so nobody cares for him, and he just vanishes. The body vanishes into the nature, right? But interestingly, after death, both of them go to Yamaloka, right? That's where Yama decides who should be sent where. So interestingly, the cobbler goes to heaven and the saint to hell. Can you guess why? Why does the cobbler go to heaven and the saint to hell? Saint was preaching all good things, and cobbler was skinning dead animals and all that stuff. Why?
Because the sage was trying to tell somebody else what to do.
Close. Any other?
He had feelings about it.
Yeah, so the reason is because the cobbler, he was doing his duty, right? He was devoted to God. He repented for what he was doing, but he did not have a choice. So he was just performing his duty to earn his living and serve the people in his own ways, right? He was just devoted to duty. But this saint, though he was preaching all good things, his mind was full of, was having hatred towards the cobbler. His thoughts were full of, what a yucky thing this cobbler is doing. That kind of thoughts were there in his mind. So because of the thoughts, the saint, because of his bad thought, that thought of dead animals, skinning the dead animals, and all that stuff, the saint lands in hell. And because pure thoughts in this cobbler's mind, his thoughts were all about doing his duty, serving the people, praying to God, and things like that. Always in God's presence. He was always in God's presence, basically. One who does his duties and prays to God is in God's presence most of the time. So this cobbler, because of his deeds and thoughts, he lands in heaven, whereas the saint, Because of it. See, he was tracking each and every dead animal that the cobbler brought. So his thoughts were full of that. Every time he passed through the cobbler's hut, he would think only about that. And he filled the entire wall with that. So he landed in hell. So thoughts play a very important role in our life, right? Um, uh, and the other lesson you should take is never count others' mistakes. You should not think about what other people are doing incorrectly. Think about what you should do correctly, right? That is also very important. See, in another sloka, Lord Krishna says that whoever, we'll cover that sloka also, but at a later time. So he says that whoever thinks only about me during the death, they are going to reach me. So irrespective of what you do the entire life, just at the moment of death, if someone thinks about the God, he is going to reach the God. That's what Krishna says.
Didn't Mahatma Gandhi do
Yeah,
that?
Mahatma Gandhi did the same thing. He was Mahatma. That's the reason why he was Mahatma. The last word he uttered was "Hey Ram," right? So, so there is this is a very this faith exists in a lot of people in India particularly. So there was a businessman who was on his deathbed. So he knew that he's going to die in a few minutes. So he calls all his sons and then says that, see, I'm going to die in a few minutes. Now I know that if I keep on reciting name, I'm going to the God directly. So he says that just be beside me, stay beside me. Uh, uh, See, I brought you up and then I gave you all these good things. Then pray for me also. Just keep reciting the name along with me, God's name, and then I'll go to God. Then everyone, they love their father, right? Obviously, everyone surrounds him and then they keep on saying the God's name. This businessman also keeps repeating the God's name, and the children also repeat the God's name. And then suddenly the youngest son, what he does is he just walks away to get something from there. He sees something. Maybe there's a paper lying there, or an important paper lying there, or something. He goes to pick that up, and this businessman gets angry. He shouts, "You sick fellow! I told you to stay here, and you do all dirty." And then he dies. What is the last word he said?
Dirty.
Dirty. So next life he is going to be born as a dirty guy, because the last thought in his mind is what counts, not the entire life. See how the anger destroyed all his life? Just one word, the last word that he uttered. See? So that is the reason why thoughts are very, very important. And last minute, it's not going to help. You have to practice. Why are you learning Bhagavad Gita at the age of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11? It's because you cannot get into these habits at the last minute. See, that man he was a businessman. He would get angry with people and he would shout at his kids. So he continued that habit. So that is the reason why you should start really early at this age, at 5 years. I told you, right? In some cultures, the boys are um, um, brought into sainthood at 5 years. Like they are initiated into certain things. Even in Christianity, there is a baptism, right? The kids are baptized. So it's like a holy path that they take. Same with Hinduism. Some cultures, some sections of Hindus, they follow this very strictly. At the age of 5, they put the boy in the holy path. Right? Same with Sikhism. Sikhism also practices some kind of baptism. So the whole idea is that you should start early on these things. Bhagavad Gita is not something that we learn just towards the end of the life. it has a lot of things which are relevant to the end of the life, but you should start really early to get into the habit, right? So thoughts play a very, very important role. And anger is madness, right? People get mad. The other word in English that used for anger is mad. You get mad at me, right? You say mad. Anger is really madness. It is if it is temporary, it is simple madness. If it lasts for long, then it is a destroyer. It's like um, insanity, right? And who is the first victim of anger? Who's the first? You know the meaning of victim, right? So who is the first victim of anger?
You?
Yeah, the person who is angry, right? Like I remember I told you what Buddha said. Buddha said that being angry with someone else is like drinking poison and thinking that the other person will die. It is so foolish. Nobody does that, right? Anger is just like that. Just because you are angry, the other person is not going to get hurt. It is you who is going to get hurt, right? It's he also Buddha also compared being angry with holding a burning coal in your palm to throw it at someone. So you're angry with someone. You want to throw a burning thing like coal. You know the meaning of coal, right? So you wants to throw. You want to throw a burning coal at the other person. You hold it with your hand. What happens? Who's first going to get hurt?
You?
The
Because
person.
it'll burn?
Yeah, the person who is holding the coal is going to burn, not the person who is standing away and then waiting to get hit, right? So it's like that. Anger is like the coal, the burning coal that you hold in your palm to throw at someone. So that's what Buddha said. Um, and can we do anything good when we are angry? Can we love? Can we be happy? We cannot do anything good when we are angry, but still we get angry, right? So we are not realizing it's anger is basically a basic instinct. We are getting into that instinct without our proper knowledge. Meditation is what helps you get your the knowledge of yourself. So when you meditate, you automatically know that your mind is going towards a path of angriness, and you are able to pull it back. Only meditation can help. There are other ways also we learn, but meditation is a very strong tool that Bhagavad Gita, uh, Lord Buddha gave us. Um, so another tool that we know from the last sloka is to not get into this anger kind of state. What is the other thing that we,
To not be aware of it?
yeah, to not be aware of it? Always be in the Krishna consciousness. Remember, we always, if you are devotion, if you have a devotion, if you are sthita dihi, in devotion to God, however powerful a person is, if he is not in the devotion state, in the state of sthita dihi, then controlling the senses is very difficult. See Ravana, you take the example of Ravana. Ravana is so powerful, right? He conquered all the worlds. He conquered even gods, right? But could he resist his bad feelings? Like he had lust and all that stuff, right? He um, he kidnapped Sita Devi and all that stuff, right? So could he control his desire?
No.
So in spite of being so powerful, he could not control his desire. Why? So however powerful a person is, if the person is not situated or stationed in godliness, he cannot control his senses. So that is a strong lesson. Your thoughts must be, you must be able to control your thoughts. Can you tell what you learned in the class about meditation? What does thoughts do? What does meditation do to the thoughts?
We learn that meditation can help you sense what your thoughts are. It can help you delete those thoughts, and it can help you create your own thoughts.
Yeah, see, it's a complete control on the thought process. You can sense your thoughts, you can delete some bad thoughts, and you can create your own good thoughts using meditation. See, even Americans believe that. And so it is very important to control our thoughts, right? Otherwise, what happens if the thoughts are not controlled, uncontrolled? They lead to attachment, and from attachment, they lead to desire, and the desire leads to anger. And the first person who will be punished because of anger is the person who is angry, right? That's the first person. Why? Why is angry so bad? Is explained in the next sloka. The next sloka reads, क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृतिविभ्रमः स्मृतिभ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशो बुद्धिनाशा प्रणश्यति बुद्धिनाशा प्रणश्यति. From anger comes delusion. From delusion, the loss of memory. From loss of memory, the destruction of discrimination. From the destruction of discrimination, the person simply perishes. Did you see what anger can do to a person? This is a very fun. These two slokas are very, very fundamental. What is the meaning of delusion?
Seeing things when you're not supposed to
Yeah,
see them.
you are seeing things which are not real, which are not correct, which can be contradicted, right? So the meaning of this sloka, the word to word meaning, krodhat. What is krodha?
Anger.
Yeah, krodhat. When there is at added to the word, it is from. So from anger, bhavati means takes place. Bhava means arise. So bhavati means takes place. Sammohaha means illusion. It's perfect illusion. Sammohat. What is sammohat? At. Sammoha, at. What is at added to a word?
From.
From. So sammohat means from illusion. Smriti means memory, of memory. Vibhramaha means bewilderment. Brahma means delusion kind of thing. Vibhrama, V is basically aiding that word. Vibhramaha means bewilderment. Smriti Bhramshat means after the memory is completely in delusion. Smriti Bhramsha. Buddhi Nasho means loss of buddhi or intelligence. What is buddhi? It's intelligence. Buddhi Nashat means from the loss of intelligence. Pranashyati, one falls down. So that is the end of the person. So this is the cycle. Many unfortunate human beings go through this cycle and perish. Many people perish like this, unfortunately. See, it's a simple thing. You just do meditation, you save from this kind of a disaster, right? But many people don't do that because it is too late. So why is it too late? Because they're already in the delusion. What is basically delusion? Like you said, delusion is basically a false belief or false impression that is very firmly maintained in your mind. In spite of in spite of contradictions which exist, you are not able to get convinced that your belief is wrong, right? So it is it though it contradicts what is accepted as reality or rational argument, you're not able to accept it. You continue to believe in this wrong belief. It is typically a symptom of mental disorder. Right? A delusion is a mental disorder. So why does this happen? Why does somebody get deluded? Because the person has thought so much that his mind has become inflexible. See, in Toastmasters, there's a club called Toastmasters, which is all about public speaking. Right? In Toastmasters, there is a module called flexibility of mind, mental flexibility. There's a module that you can do on mental flexibility. How to improve your flexibility of the mind. Flexibility of mind is very important. If you are inflexible, then it's very difficult to do anything, let alone convince people. But to do anything, your mind has to be very flexible. So when does the mind become inflexible? When you keep on thinking, right? It's like the clay. What is clay? You all know the meaning of clay, right? So when the clay is wet, you can do a lot of good stuff from the clay, right? Like we went which place did we go to so many places. We buy nice
Ganesha?
yeah, like Ganesha, right? We go to we get Ganesha. It's made of clay basically. You can make nice Ganesha idols from clay, with wet clay. But when the clay becomes dried up, when it is baked, can you do anything with it? Right? If it is not baked into the right shape, then you cannot do anything with it. It's the brain is just like that. The physiology of brain is like that. When you keep on thinking about a few things, particularly those which impact your senses, your mind gets fixated on those thoughts. You're not able to see a different picture. Your mind has become inflexible like the baked clay, right? So it becomes inflexible and you're not able to look at any other thing, a different perspective. So flexibility, mental flexibility that is taught in Toastmasters is basically, it will train you, it is expected to train you on how to make your mind flexible. So it's an interesting module. There are some techniques for that. We'll not go into those techniques. But from this sloka, it is very important that we guard against senses. So senses, just like we guard from coronavirus, right? We don't want to get coronavirus. Similarly, we don't want a mountain lion to come to our home. We take very special precautions, and we don't want to wildfires. We don't want to go near the wildfires. We take very great precautions to not uh, uh, to not become a prey to all these bad things: coronavirus, wildfires, mountain lions, and so on and so forth. So we heard that Alam Rock Park, um, there are some mountain lions roaming. Then we will not go there, right? We will not go for hiking that weekend, even though we were going every weekend, right? So just like we guard from them, from all these disasters, we should guard ourselves from our own senses. What are our senses? The basic instincts, like the desire, like um, like anger, like lust, like greed. We keep on collecting things. That's another act of senses. It's all. So we must guard against those senses. It is very important. to proactively guard against the senses. And it is not easy, even for Ravana. He is a great devotee, right? In spite of that, he could not control his senses, his lust, his desires, he could not control, right? So senses are stronger than the strongest of the person in the world. Ravana was considered the strongest of the persons in the world. He conquered even the gods. Even to him, the senses could not be brought under control. So that is the reason why senses are very, very dangerous. First thing is they are dangerous. See, they led to where? Where did they lead Ravana to? To his death, right? To his death. Such a powerful person, such a devoted person. Uh, just because he could not control his senses, he died like a no one, right? So that is the reason why we have to take every precaution right from very young age to guard against our senses. Senses are very powerful. In another sloka, Lord Krishna says that senses are like wild horses. It is not easy to control them. So they keep on running. So we need to practice controlling our senses right from a very young age. So some of the techniques that you can use, of course, meditation. The other is devotion. Uh, as devotion increases, bad thoughts decrease. Why? Why so? For instance, suppose somebody dies in the house. You're so attached to somebody, maybe grandfather, who lives with you, who takes care of you, who plays with you, who teaches you all good stories and all that. And then suddenly one day the grandfather dies. How do you feel?
Sad.
And do you get any bad thoughts during that time? Like, do you feel like eating that cake in the fridge?
No.
Do you feel like um, buying that clothes from the store that you always long for?
No.
No. Same thing when you are devoted. Remember the swing that we talked about, one extreme to other extreme? So one extreme is sadness, the other extreme is devotion, right? Devotion is bliss, pure bliss. And when somebody dies, it is complete sadness. So both are quite similar. When you are either completely devoted or you're completely sad, you don't think of any bad thing. So that is why devotion helps. As devotion increases to a great extent, then bad thoughts stop coming into your mind. So that is one way. And meditation, like you said, you can program your thoughts if you meditate, right? And many thoughts, uh, having many thoughts is also not good. Just think what is right, and then don't spend too much time. You should be able to see, like operating computers run something called an operating system, right? An operating system is what runs your programs. So does it run a program just because it likes for a longer time? No, right? So it basically takes one program, runs it for a very short duration, then takes the next program, runs it for a very short duration in a round. It's called round robin schedule. If there are 10 programs running, like the PowerPoint is running, there's a Zoom that is running, then there is some other programs that are running, right? So how there's only one operating system which runs these programs. So how does it manage? It basically takes a round robin approach, like it goes round the processes. First process, PowerPoint, it executes for just very minute time interval. Then next it will go to the Zoom program, executes it for a very very few microseconds. Then again comes back to PowerPoint, executes it. So because it is microseconds, we cannot even notice the change. So it is as if both the programs are running parallelly. But in reality, the operating system is running in small chunks, the programs. See? But does it, just because it likes the PowerPoint program, does it spend longer time? No. So same thing with the mind. You should be able to preempt. Preempt means remove. Just like you said, programming the mind, right? Using meditation, you should be in a position to preempt your thoughts. So if a thought is taking too long, then it's not a good sign. You should quickly preempt that thought. So when do we spend a lot of time thinking? Is there any time we spent a lot of time thinking? For a riddle, yes.
Difficult things.
Yeah, difficult things. You're coming closer to the answer. Difficult things. Difficult things take a lot of your thought process. So difficulty is relative. You know that, right? Some people may find some things difficult, and the same thing may not be too difficult for the others. For instance, I can lift 40 pounds uh, easily, but the same 40 pounds, it is very difficult for you to lift because you're small children, right? So difficulty is relative. Same thing with difficulty of uh, things in your mind. Uh, you can see difficulty as weakness of your mind. If your mind is weak, small things also become difficult. If your mind is strong, stronger things also do not sound so difficult. So it is your mind which needs to be strong, not the thing. So you spend lot of time thinking when your mind is weak and your decision process is weak, right? Same thing in machine learning. This problem of weak mind is remember, machine learning is also like our human mind. It does similar functions as human mind. So in machine learning, there's something called as decision trees. There's a technique called decision trees. And in decision trees, we carefully avoid weak paths. We take paths which make the algorithm stronger, right? Um, just like we need to take paths which make our mind strong. So that is why you should do difficult things from your child. When you're a child itself, you should start doing difficult things, like solve difficult math problems, solve difficult problems. Then your mind becomes like puzzles, riddles, you said, right? Solving difficult puzzles, riddles will make your mind strong. Whereas if you watch TV and dumb shows, your mind becomes weak. Then your thought process becomes diluted. So it is very important to make our thought process strong, right? The same thing happens in machine learning in this algorithm called decision trees. Because thoughts is all about decisions. Why do you think? To make a decision, right? Eventually, you are going to make a decision. That is the reason why you are thinking, right? Decision. Let us look at decision trees. How does machine learning algorithm make sure that the decision process is strong? Okay, we'll look at a problem. So in this problem, uh, so this is a slightly difficult problem for you, but I'll explain you very quickly. So there is, your parents file taxes, right? They file taxes. You have to pay money to the government in form of taxes. For every dollar that you earn, you need to pay taxes to the government for them to lay roads, for them to do all the common stuff that is common to a lot of people, like run the VTA and all that stuff, right? So so sometimes you pay more taxes from your salary every month. Your parents get salary, right? So from that salary, there is a deduction every month. Money gets deducted, and at the end, if the parent paid a lot of money, then they get a refund based on other parameters. Uh, or if the parent paid less money, then they have to pay again. They have to pay more. So wait a minute. Okay. So that is the concept of taxes refund, tax refund. So we are given a table with a number of people's status, people's data. So the first column, basically these columns are features. In machine learning, remember features, we talked about features. So each column is a feature, right? Except that the last column is the decision. So we are trying to find out if a person will cheat or not on the taxes. People can cheat also, right? Instead of saying that they got so much income, they can reduce that income and say they got only this much income. So there are many ways to cheat on taxes. So this problem in machine learning tries to solve, tries to find out if a person is going to cheat on taxes. Why is this an important problem? Because income tax people look for this kind of data. They want to find people who can cheat on taxes and then they go after them, right? They audit the taxes, right? So this is a very important machine learning problem in real world. So what are the features which can tell if a person is going to cheat? So the first feature in this table is refund, whether the person is going to get a refund or not. Then the second feature is whether the person is married or single, right? The third feature is the income, the amount earned by the parent in the entire year. So that is the taxable income. So based on these three features, we should be able to tell whether the person is going to cheat or not. So tell me something. If a person is married and both of them, uh, uh, both the spouses are filing the taxes together, are they? Is the person more likely to cheat or less likely to cheat?
Less likely.
Why?
Because there's two people.
Right. See, you're smart. See, when the marital status on the tax form is married, they're very. It is found that they are less likely to cheat because there are two people filing the taxes, and if one person cheats, the other person will also get into trouble. Right. So that is the reason why uh, uh, married people are less likely to not cheat, or less likely to cheat rather, right? So you get the idea, right? Similarly, refund. So getting the refund. Suppose the taxpayer is expecting a refund. Is he likely to cheat or no?
No.
It is difficult to tell. Right? It can go both ways. But there is some dependency, but it is not as straightforward as marital status. Similarly, taxable income. If the person's tax income is high, is he likely to cheat or less likely to cheat?
Less likely to cheat.
Right, because he already has money, right? So you get the idea. He already has enough money, so there's no real need for him to cheat, right? So these are the features. Now, based on these features, income tax department, the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, wants to determine whether a new person is likely to cheat. So using this table, we can come up with a decision tree like this. So first, check if the person is getting refund. The person is getting refund, then he is less likely to cheat. No, the answer. So you can look here. Refund, yes. Cheat, no. Refund, yes. Cheat, no. Refund, yes. Cheat, no. You see? You see that? Oh, it's not showing. Oh, okay. The cursor was not showing up. Similarly, for everywhere there is a refund, the cheat status is no. This is the data collected from previous people, right? So that is why refund If he is getting refund, then is not likely to cheat. But if he's not getting refund, then check the next feature, marital status. If he is married, he or she is married, then the person is not going to cheat. You can look here, look up here. Married, no. Married, no. Married, no. Everywhere there's married, there's no. He's not going to cheat. So you just write no here. But if the person is not married, status is either single or divorced, then look at the taxable income, the third feature. And then if the income is more than 80,000, the person is likely to cheat. If the income is less than 80,000, the person is less likely to cheat, which is not really true, which is contradictory to what we believe. But this is the data given to us, so we have to go by the data, not by our guess, right? So you can look up here. If where this income is greater than 80K or less than 80K? Greater than 80K. He doesn't cheat. So wherever the income is greater than 80K, you can see that the person doesn't cheat. So that is how you capture here. 80K. Oh, it's reverse actually. There's a small mistake, I think. If the income is greater than 80K, he does not cheat. This should be no. And this should be yes. I'll change that slide. Or I'll reverse this number and that's. So yeah, our intuition is right. If the taxable income is greater than 80K, he is less likely to cheat, right? So you get the idea of a decision tree, right? And the same thing can be represented in a different way. Like instead of refund, we started with refund, right? At the top, we can start with marital status. And then if we can go with marital status, refund, and taxable income, and so on. So there are multiple ways of generating this decision tree. You agree? So either any feature can go to the top, right? So you understand that part, right? Now, how do we use decision trees in machine learning? So we generate a decision tree using this kind of table. The table of previous taxpayers is given to us. We generated a decision tree from that, like in the previous slide, like this. And then that is called the model, right? And then we apply that model on new data. These are tested. These are new people. We don't know if they are going to cheat or not. All question marks, right? So we want to see whether these people will cheat or not. So that is why, that is when we apply this model, the decision tree, to determine whether they cheat or not. For instance, take the first row. The first row, this person does not get a refund. His marital status is married and his taxable income is 80,000. Will he cheat or not? So how do we determine? We start from the first root. This is called the root. This is like a tree, right? These are all branches, and these are like the leaves, and these are like the nodes. These are called nodes. This node is called root because it's a root starting inverted tree, right? So it's like so we start from the root of the tree. Then we look at the refund. Refund is no, so we go here. So we go to we take the right side of refund and go check the marital status. So next is marital status. He is married, so we go right again. Then the answer is no. So the final answer is no, right? That's how we apply decision trees to machine learning problems. Now you have to tell me something. Now, so this is the table given to us, and we saw that we can come up with any number of trees like this, which do the job for us. Now, which should come at the top? Which feature should come at the top? There are three features. Which feature should come at the top? Huh?
Refund?
Refund? Why?
I think it should be either refund or taxable income
Why?
because you already have more, so you don't need to cheat. While if you're married and you have less money, then maybe both of the people have the same mindset and think the same way. So there's still a slight possibility.
Okay, for a short time, just forget about this table. You tell me which of the three is more definitive predictor of cheating. Getting a refund is more will tell you more about whether the person is going to cheat, or marital status is going to tell more about the person is going to cheat, or taxable income tells you more about the person is going to cheat. Which of the three is more uh, gives is more helps you better in prediction?
Taxable income
Why?
because it gives you the exact number, and based on that you can tell if they have a sufficient amount, then that means that they're probably not.
So can we assume that everyone who has income more than 80,000 in a year will not cheat? Can we assume that? No. How about, can we assume that every married couple who are filing taxes jointly are not going to cheat?
No,
So which one is more likely? Getting higher income and not cheating, or getting being filing this tax as married and not cheating? Which one is more likely? Can you guess? So take an instance of the two of you, right? Suppose you and your friend. You are in the team together. So and if anyone does a mistake, both will be punished. So you're more likely to do a mistake in this situation, or more likely to do a mistake when you're alone and everything is in your control? There is a good reward for doing a mistake. You will also get a good reward, but if you're caught, you'll be punished. Okay, another example. Suppose you're driving a car. You assume that you learned how to drive a car, and you're driving the car, and uh, your mom or dad is sitting beside you, right? And if you do a mistake, your mom and dad also get into trouble. So you're more likely to do a mistake then, or you're more likely to do a mistake when you're driving the car alone?
alone.
Yes, the same thing here, right? Marital status, if the couple is filing as married, then they are less likely to do mistake than when the person is, even if the person's income is higher, if he's filing as single, then more chances of doing a mistake and cheating on the taxes, right? You agree? So which one is more certain? Which one is a better predictor?
Married.
Yeah, marital status is a better predictor. Now, next question. Which one should come at the top? More definitive one or less definitive one?
More definitive one.
Right. Because the moment we see, if suppose marital status is more definitive and marital status comes at the top, then you can take a decision immediately here. You don't even have to go farther down because it is so definite, right? So machine learning algorithm, the decision tree algorithm chooses the feature which is most definitive among all the features given to us. That is how the algorithm proceeds. So the more definitive things, the higher they are ranked. How do you find which one is more definitive? By looking at the data and computing probability. There's something called there's a subject called information theory. If you learn computer science, you will learn information theory. So in information theory, you can decide which feature, based on its values, you can determine which features are more definitive. So we apply information theory to find the most definitive feature and rank it high. So that's how decision trees work in machine learning. Our thought process should also be like that. We should choose the important uh, things which are important to us, which are important to the society.
We should prioritize.
We should prioritize. Right, that's the right word. We should prioritize, just like the machine learning algorithm here prioritizes on all the features. We have to prioritize. Discretion. See, in Bhagavad Gita also, Lord Krishna says discretion, right? Um, from loss of memory, the destruction of discrimination. Discrimination is what? Prioritizing. Discrimination is basically prioritizing. So when you lose memory, you will lose the capability to prioritize. Your mind becomes weak. So that is the reason why strengthening your mind, strengthening your memory, and strengthening your discretion are very, very important. Discrimination and discretion are the same, right? Prioritizing, basically. These are very important. All the time, practice it. There are two things. One is watching TV, the other is reading this new chapter in the book, preparing for tomorrow's class. Prioritize which one is good and go with that. So practice that prioritizing. Similarly, memory. Memorize a lot of things. Memorize slokas, memorize formulae, memorize definitions. The more you memorize, the stronger your memory will become. And so this is how you improve yourself, right? So it is very important that we improve right from this small age when you're very young. There's no point waiting till the last minute. Like that businessman who waited till the last minute. What happened to him? He became dirt, right? Next life, he just became dirt. So that is the reason why you should practice from very young age, all these things. So what are you going to practice? You are going to, first thing is, what is the seed of all this? It's a thought. First thing is practice only good thoughts. Do not try to find fault with others. Do not complain, right? As much as possible, do not complain. Clean your thoughts. You can clean your thoughts by process of meditation. Like you rightly said, the meditation is a tool for completely getting our thoughts under control. So thoughts. So practice good thoughts. So that is the first thing. Next thing is attachment. Do not get attached to anything. In the last sloka, we saw how we should not get attached to whether happiness or sorrowness. So practice that also. It is easier to practice when you're happy. When you're happy, don't get attached to happiness. That is probably much easier. When you practice that, you automatically get detached when you have sorrows. Because it's a swing, right? So practice that. And then practice not having desires. Do not have a lot of desires like, oh, I want to buy that, I want to buy this. When I grow up, I will do this. And those kind of desires, you should have goals, but you should not have desires. There's a difference. Remember, we talked about the difference, right? So control the desires and then control the anger, right? Then improve the memory. Improve memory through various ways. Memorize more and more. Brain is a muscle, that's all, right? The more you strengthen it, the more you work with it, the more you strengthen it. Just like any other muscle. Why do you do HIIT? Or why do you do exercise? To strengthen your muscles. Brain is also a muscle, right? So you need to strengthen it, right? So practice memorizing a lot of things. So every sloka, you by the end of this course, 101 slokas you should memorize completely with meanings and the meaning of the words also. You should pretty much know a lot of words in Sanskrit. So memorize, improve your memory. Then practice discrimination, prioritizing. Always prioritize one over the other. So, so that's how you really improve from time to time, right? Any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, let us end the session with our regular sloka. Prayer rather, not sloka, prayer. Asato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu. Samasta Sanmangalani Santu.